Zheng was born as a prince in the state of Qin in 259 BCE. He became the king of that state upon the death of his father when he was just 13. His ministers were waging wars with the other states, and Zheng expanded these. By the age of 38, he had brought all the other Chinese states under control, unifying China, and describing himself as the first Emperor Qin of China. This is a portrait of him from the 18th century. In many ways, Emperor Qin is comparable to the early Roman emperors. His great achievement was unification. He did this by standardizing the Chinese units of weights and the currency, and even the axles of carts to facilitate transport. He also standardized the Chinese script, so there could be one communication system for the whole of China. He sought to standardize philosophy, endorsing a form of legalism which basically said if people did not follow the laws, they would be punished. At the same time, he banned books that did not accord with that way of thinking. However, he is best known for the Terracotta Warriors. He was very afraid of death and took extensive steps to seek an elixir of life. However, for his protection after death, he created a vast army with 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and 520 horses, and 20 cavalry horses. They were discovered by a local farmer in 1974, and only one part of the area in which they are located has been excavated. Much more remains to be done. Note that right on the front line are men with no weapons, probably prisoners who are often used as human shields at these sorts of times. The figures are life-sized and remarkable for the fact that everyone is different. They vary in height, uniform, and hairstyle according to rank. There is great detail also in their clothing. They were originally all painted. There is one area which appears to be a command post with high-ranking officers and a war chariot. It all appears as if a huge palace and military command centre were established underground. Most of the statues originally held bronze weapons, such as swords, daggers, spears, and so on, and while many appear to have been looted from the tombs, 40,000 bronze items have been found. With all that was accomplished by Emperor Qin, it took a huge toll on the ordinary people, and his dynasty disintegrated quite quickly after his death. This was seen by Chinese historians as a result of his tyranny. After the death of Emperor Qin, revolts erupted. 2 rebel leaders fought for leadership, the victor being Liu Bang, who became the first emperor of the Han Dynasty. The Han emperors tried a different way of ruling China to that of Emperor Qin, and were much more benign, developing government based on Confucian principles. It was also probably during this period that Buddhism was introduced to China from India, and one of the earliest pagodas was built, Farman Temple, 120 kilometres west of Xi'an. The original temple was built to house a relic of the Buddha, a finger bone sent by King Asoka in India. It's not known what the original temple was like, but a 4-storey pagoda was built in 660 AD. The present pagoda was built in 1985 on the model of a Ming pagoda. Beside it has been found an underground palace, which now houses many ancient monuments indicative of a long and significant history for this site. Among the objects is one of the earliest royal Chinese tea sets, indicating that the Chinese tea ceremony has a very long history. A huge new temple in the shape of a pair of hands was built beside it in 2009, ready for the World Fellowship of Buddhists to meet here in 2014. The entrance is more than 1.5 kilometres long and is best navigated with the assistance of a golf buggy. In many ways, the Han era was a golden age of Chinese history, with great advances in many areas of science and technology. Zhang Heng, who lived from 78 to 139 CE, developed a water clock and a seismometer to detect earthquakes. He documented 2,500 stars in more than 100 constellations. He corrected the Chinese calendar and wrote a new formula for pi. He was one of the first to use negative numbers in maths. During this period, the Chinese invented the rudder and developed the design for their ships. They began to use anesthesia in surgery and extended travel into other parts of Asia. Indeed, there was some awareness of the existence of Rome, and Romans made it to China in 166 CE. In this era, there were many warlords who exerted influence over particular territories. One of these was Gongsun Shu, who was governor of Daizhang, and in 25 CE proclaimed himself King of Shu, and later as the White Emperor. He originally built what is now known as the White Emperor City as a military base. It is on a hill at the mouth of the first of the gorges on the Yangtze, the Qutang Gorge. He sent forces down the Yangtze to conquer the eastern region, but he didn't get very far. He was defeated by another warlord in 35 CE. Later, this outpost became a base for Liu Bai, the first king of the Shu kingdom. As he died there, he entrusted the whole area and the well-being of his sons to his prime minister, Zhuge Liang, a famous politician, strategist, writer, and inventor. Zhuge Liang is remembered for mentoring the sons of his master without trying to seize power for himself. After about 350 years of infighting and conflict between various warlords, the Xu Dynasty emerged. One of the great symbols of this was the construction of the Grand Canal from Hangzhou to the Yangtze and beyond. This photo is of the Grand Canal today, near its starting point in Hangzhou, south of Shanghai. It is 1,776 kilometres in length, making it the world's longest canal, as well as its oldest. And for much of its distance, it is still in use. It has had a huge influence on the movement of troops and trade, and contributed much to China's internal economy. It was during the short Xu Dynasty that Buddhism began to flourish further. Emperor Wen converted to Buddhism and proclaimed his empire as Buddhist. The Lingyin monastery had been formed by an Indian monk 250 years earlier, but became an important centre for Buddhism in this period. The Tang Dynasty was founded by Li Yuan, a military commander who took control when the last Xu emperor was murdered. Tang Dynasty is often referred to as a high point in Chinese civilization and culture, with the development of much dancing and music. This was illustrated or symbolised, at least for us, in the performance of Tang-inspired music and dance. It's also a great period for poetry and art. This performance took place in Xi'an, the Tang Dynasty capital, then known as Chang'an. Trade between China, the Middle East and Europe was quite extensive during this time. Chairs were introduced to China, and silk and paper were introduced to the Western world. Liege horses were imported into China, replacing small ponies that they'd previously used. Music and musical instruments were exchanged. Xi'an became the largest and most populous city in the world, with 2 million inhabitants. Xi'an was also cosmopolitan, with people from around the world living in it, as well as Buddhism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Judaism and Islam were practiced in Xi'an. The original Muslims were merchants from the Middle East who settled in Xi'an. For more than 1,000 years they've maintained their trade and their religious traditions here. This is the Great Mosque of Xi'an, Chinese in style, yet very definitely expressing the Islamic faith. This is the main prayer hall. The Tang Dynasty was interrupted briefly by the Zhou Dynasty from 690 to 705. Emperor Jiaozong suffered a stroke, and his consort, Wu Zetian, became his spokesperson. After getting rid of all opposition, she became empress in 690, proclaiming a new era. She was buried in Quanling Mausoleum, 85 kilometres northwest of Xi'an, along with her husband and a number of members of her family. There are stone steles for her and her husband, with her husband's achievements detailed, but nothing on her stele. There was another period of turmoil in which various states vied with each other for power before Emperor Taizu of Song usurped the throne of the Zhou kingdom. Song forces regrouped in Hangzhou, making that their capital and ruling the area of China south of the Yangtze River. The Six Harmonies Pagoda was originally constructed in 970, but fully rebuilt during the Southern Song dynasty. It was said that the original reason for construction was to calm the tides on the Quantang River. It was also used to help navigation on the river, possibly being used as a lighthouse. And in 1271, Kublai Khan established the Yuan Empire, which now included Mongolia. For the first time, China was ruled by external powers. However, in order to win the support of the Chinese, Kublai Khan modelled his government on the traditions of the Chinese. As an illustration of what this meant, one can look at the Wang family compound. The Wang family came to live north of Pingyao in 1312, and began to build their wealth by selling bean curd. The family grew in wealth and prestige over several centuries, partly from trade, but then partly also from taking government positions. Most of the present-day compound dates from the late 17th century to the late 18th century. In all, there are today 231 courtyards and 2,078 rooms in the compound. The courtyards of the compound give one the feel that the family was increasingly looking in on itself and becoming more protective. Probably at the end of the Yuan Dynasty, China was ahead of Europe in the development of its civilization, with its means of transport, its productions, its books, its understanding of the universe. However, over the following centuries, China increasingly looked in on itself, gradually closing itself to the outside world.